The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to rest in green pastures, leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul, and leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Cheryl Francis, and I'm going to be the speaker this morning. I'm going to have you rise to join us in the hymn as you're able, and then it'll be followed by a prayer of invocation. And I have lots of spirit now, guys. Please join me in an attitude of prayer. Mother, Father, God, allow us to feel the strength and power of our divine nature, combining with the energy of divine spirit in this place where we gather to learn and grow with those who are like-minded. Let us imagine our heartbeat as the heartbeat of the universe, so we may experience that great oneness that we strive towards. Allow us to feel free to join our energy with that of infinite intelligence, so we may share our gifts with all the world in deeds, thoughts, and prayer, as we now pray for all the unlovable, for those who have no one to pray for them, for all those who are suffering and in pain, whether it be physical, mental, or emotional, for all the lonely and the brokenhearted, for all those who have no homes to live in or food to nourish them, and for all those who are living in confusion because they have lost their way. Now let us affirm our prayer by praying the prayer that Jesus taught to his followers. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from error. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Do we all feel loved? I hope so, because we are. What we're going to talk about today is the restoration of our soul. Our Bible verse is from the Landis Bible, Psalm 23, verses 1, 2, and 3. And it is in fact what we opened with. The Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He made me to rest in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul and leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Our Creator possesses great unconditional love for us always, no matter what we've done or where we've been. And this unconditional love will restore, repair, bring our soul back to its natural state, which is one in which we live in divinity. Because our soul is the deepest part of our being, only the universal creative energy who created us through the law of mentality knows what we need to restore our soul. If we have strayed from a close relationship with divine intelligence and we want to have that relationship restored, we can only do that when we're in a correct frame of mind to receive the lessons that we had to learn. You know, often we ask for something. I want to be this kind of person. I want this or that. But then we're not conscious of it during the day. We don't stop ourselves every time that we're not following that mantra. So you have to be in the right mental state. And here's just a little illustration to show you what I mean. A father was trying to teach his young son the evils of alcohol. So he put a worm in a glass of water and a worm in a glass of alcohol. The worm arm in the water lived, the one in the alcohol shriveled up and died. The father said to the son, "What did you learn from this?" The son said, "Well, if you drink alcohol, you're never going to have worms." Logical. He came to a logical conclusion, but it was not a soul-felt conclusion. As adults, we have to use our heart and our mind to come to conclusions, just not our intellect. So, if we deeply want our relationship to be mended, then we have to direct all of our thoughts towards that goal. And even if we made a spiritual commitment, it's so easy in this world of duality to be led off of our path. We have advertisements, we have people with opinions, we have people we live with that necessarily are not spiritual. There's all types of reasons. So it's easy to be led astray in this world. We have a young man who is living in a monastery, and he wanted to lead a simple, natural life, free of worldly desires. And after a while, he decided to leave because he found that he had to do a lot of material duties while he was there, and he thought that that interrupted with his spirituality. So he left to live a simpler life. He took a bowl with him and an extra pair of pants and set off. And he found a nice cave to live in. And he was very comfortable, and he hung his pants up and went to sleep. He woke up the next morning and there were holes in his pants. So a villager was walking by and noticed this holy man and greeted him and asked him how he was doing. And the young man said, "Well, I'm doing fine, except my pants are full of holes." And the villager said, "Well, you need a cat. It must be a mouse. You must have mice around. So I'll tell you what, I'll bring you a cat. It'll take care of the mouse." So he brought the young man a cat. And the young man found he had to go into the village every day and ask for milk for the cat. He had no way of providing milk for him. So the villagers got tired of this, and they grouped together and they said, "We'll buy him a cow." So they walked up and had a meeting with him and gave him a cow and said, Now you have your milk, you don't have to come and get it from us every day." That was fine, until the cow began to graze in their fields. Began to stomple on things and eat things up. So they had to come and meet with him again, and they said, "We can't have this cow in our fields. We're farmers. We have to produce stuff. We can't have it ruined." And the young man said, "Well, where am I going to get food for my cow?" So they offered him some land. They said, "There, you have land, you can grow your own stuff on there for your cow to eat." And the young man was pleased, but he didn't feel like working the land. So he recruited the children in the village to come and live there with him, and he taught them, but they also did all the work so that they had food to eat and the cow had food to eat. Villagers came again and said, "We need our children. They are part of our workforce. Our fields are being neglected." And the young man said, "Well, how will I take care of all this?" One man said, "Well, I've got a virtuous daughter that's of marriage age. Why don't you just get married and have a wife take care of this?" And he was like, "Okay." So they started to plan the wedding. Well, the head monk, the father of the monastery, heard this and ran over and took the young man aside and said, "What are you doing? I mean, you came here to live a simpler life. Now you have a cat, you have a dog, you have fields, you have children here, and you're going to take a wife? How is this going to make your life simple?" And the young man saw the light go off in his brain. He goes, "You're right. You would not believe it, but this all started because a mouse chewed holes in my pants." So he went back with the father to the monastery to be under the care once more, the spiritual care of the father of the monastery. The story just goes to prove that things come in gradually on you. They happen to you. A lot of it's influenced by what we're told, what we see, what we think we need, when we don't really. We complicate our lives ourselves unnecessarily. If we really want a restoration of the soul, we have to set time aside and maybe get rid of some things so that we have time to spend in meditation and prayer. It's easy to get led down that path where you have so much to take care of. You're cleaning all the time, or you're cooking all the time, or you're shopping. You don't have time. You have to make the time. And you can't allow people to encroach on you, their ideas and their values. The best story in the Bible about restoration of soul is, of course, the parable of the prodigal son. The word prodigal actually means spendthrift. I have to look it up. You never see it any place but in this story. But that's what it really does mean, that you're somebody who's not responsible with money. So the reason that Jesus told this parable was because the Pharisees were criticizing him because he ate with sinners, and he invited sinners in. And Jesus told them this parable to show that even lost sinners are worthy of receiving restoration of their soul. That every being on earth is worthy of this. So in this parable we have two sons, one of who cannot wait to get his inheritance. Think about it. His inheritance was 1/3 of everything the father owned. Now, if the father's still alive, which he was, he's using this stuff. But the father said, okay, you can have it. Go ahead. That's what's going to make you happy. You can have it. This decision reflects the indulgence that universal intelligence shows towards us. Even when we act selfishly or against our own best interest, our free will is a gift, and we can use it or abuse it. It's up to us. If we misuse it, eventually it will lead us to the realization that we need to return to that source and be healed. That somehow we have gotten off the path and went someplace that we probably shouldn't have. So the son got his inheritance. The first thing he did was get out of the Holy Land. He wanted to go live in a land where he could do what he wanted and no one would criticize him. So he went to a country that was pagan. And he had a good old time and spent all of his inheritance. And that was fine, except then he had to get a job. He didn't know how to do much of anything. He ended up feeding pigs, which for a Jewish person is probably the lowest of the low, because they have nothing to do with pork. So he's feeding pigs, and he's hungry, and he can't even eat the food that is feeding the pigs. And he's considering his situation, and he thinks about how well his father took care of the servants. So he came to the conclusion that he would go home, admit to his father he had led a simple life, that he spent all of his inheritance, and that he wasn't worthy to be called his father's son. That he would beg that his father would take him back as a servant so he could once again be under his father's care. So he had this speech all prepared. And he walks home, and his father sees him in the distance and runs out and hugs him and grabs him and is so glad and so happy that he's home. The young man barely gets his little speech out. The father didn't hold any grudges. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't demand an apology. He didn't make accusations. He simply welcomed him home joyously. Our true Father is divine consciousness, and we are often wayward children. But when we choose to return to Him in consciousness, we receive only a total, loving welcome. We have to remember that. We are the ones who blame ourselves. We are the ones who feel shame for what we have done. Divine consciousness does not care. They love us and will meet us wherever we are. Because whatever happens to us in this world is part of what we need to learn. If we unite our outer senses with the inner senses and the inner spirit, there's great rejoicing. And we are flooded with vitality, which is embodied in this story by the robe that the Father put around His Son. He also gave His Son a ring, which was the unending power that is put in our hands when we return. And our understanding is strengthened. The fattened calf is the strength, always waiting for the needy soul. And when all these relations have been established within and without, there is rejoicing. The dead man of sense is made alive in the consciousness of spirit. The soul is restored and the lost is found. However, in the story of the prodigal son, not everybody's happy. You had an older brother there, and he was, what is going on? We're having a big celebration for this brother who's a sinner, who wasted the money. He doesn't deserve anything. I've been here and I listened to my father faithfully. I followed our religion and I did every single thing I was supposed to do. I never had a celebration. I was never offered a fattened calf. He really felt as if the treatment that his younger brother was receiving was an injustice to him. I think if we look a little further down, we might sense that his real fear was that since the brother was back, his inheritance was going to be reduced. His status in the household was going to be reduced. Obviously, his father liked the other brother better than him. But the father was a wise man. And we have to remember in this story, the father represents universal intelligence. He came to the older son and said, "You haven't lost your place in the family, and your inheritance is not going to be changed. This celebration is not a threat to you. It's a celebration of joy because your brother was dead to us, and now he is alive. He is now returned to the correct state in his life." And of course, the lesson is that divine spirit will restore our spirit and care for us always when we are ready to return to him. Of course, he loves us all the time. But if we're of the disposition or the attitude that we don't receive this love, it's not doing us any good. But when we are ready to listen, when we are ready to return, there is nothing but joy. And if we never left, we still have the unconditional love of the divine as much as those who have come back through a dramatic conversion. So we must never resent somebody, but invite them back with a spiritual life of celebration. We can't worry about what they were when they first came in, or what they had been before they went through this need to join themselves with divine spirit. We have to accept them the way that they are and be glad. Be glad for them. So we're all here traveling that path. We're all desiring to be restored, to be made whole. And no matter how far along that path we go, we always learn that there's so much left that we don't know. There's still so much left to do. And that's why we are here, to learn lessons. In the process, at some point, we are ready to return to our Creator, willing, and have our souls restored. And no matter how much we think we have wasted our opportunities, or how often we have strayed off the path, we remember that our Creator possesses great unconditional love for us always. And this unconditional love will restore your soul. All we have to do is open up to receive it. And so it is.